move the second reading motion that the bill be now read a second time.
I move Cathaoirleach, and I'm sharing time with Deputies O'Loughlin, Scanlon and Butler at this opening slot. Cathaoirleach.
That's agreed.
Agreed. Can I start by saying, Cathaoirleach, that I welcome the opportunity to commence this second stage debate on the Criminal Justice Victims of Crime Amendment Bill 2018. The purpose of this legislation is to give greater support to victims of gender-based violence, sexual violence or violence within a close relationship. I think it is very important that we have this debate in the context of the information available to us about victims of sexual offences in this country. We've learned from the recent statistics on crime published by the Central Statistics Office that there is a 10% increase in sexual offences reported for the second quarter of 2018. We'd noted for the first quarter of 2018 that similarly there also was a 10% increase. When we're looking at this increase in sexual offences, I suppose we don't definitively know what's the reason for the increase in reporting of sexual offences. It may be because people who are victims of sexual offences have become more self-confident and feel better about reporting the fact that they are victims of such offences to An Garda Síochána. Hopefully that is the reason for the increase. However, it could also be the case that the increase is because of the fact that the incidence of sexual offences in Ireland is increasing. If that is the case, that would be an extremely worrying development. However, we don't know what is the cause of this reported increase in sexual offences, and that is why, as I'm sure Minister Stanton will agree, it is so important for us to get further research done in this area. The government a number of months ago committed to commencing a new SAVI report to find out what actually is the instance of sexual offences in Ireland. Is it on the increase, or is it simply that people are becoming more self-confident in reporting it? Tomorrow I'll have the opportunity to question the Minister for Justice on questions such as when that reporting and further research is going to be completed. I suppose one of the things that makes you realise that sexual offences are distinct and different from other offences is that we have an unacceptable low level of reportage of sexual offences. If somebody is the victim of burglary or somebody is the victim of a standard assault, in the vast majority of cases people will report that to An Garda Síochána. Unfortunately, in the case of people, particularly women, who are the victims of sexual violence or gender-based violence or violence in a close relationship, we know that those offences aren't reported to the same extent, to the extent that they should be. I read the report by 1 in 4 that does a lot of good work in respect of representing the interests of people who are victims of sexual abuse, and it has estimated that approximately only 15% of people who are victims of sexual abuse make complaints to An Garda Síochána. There's a responsibility on us as legislators to do something, to take legislative steps to improve those statistics. It is not simply acceptable that we sit here and state, well, there isn't much we can do in respect to that. It's just a tradition that these types of offences aren't reported to the same extent as other offences. That's not acceptable. Part of the reason as to why there is such low reportage of these offences is because that the victims of the offences can find the whole court process and criminal justice system very intimidating. I want to state at the outset, I'm not suggesting that the principles in a criminal trial should be in any way radically subverted. I'm not suggesting that we should depart from the principle that somebody is innocent until proven guilty, and I'm not departing from the suggestion that an accused should have their full constitutional rights before a court when they're being prosecuted with a criminal offence. However, we have to do something to make the process of the criminal justice process more acceptable and more comfortable for individuals who have been the victims of sexual violence. One of the factors that is identified by individuals who are complainants in prosecutions for sexual offences is that they were not aware of what was required of them in the criminal justice process. The purpose of this legislation is to amend Section 17 of the Criminal Justice Victims of Crime Act that was enacted last year, so that any person who is a complainant in a prosecution, or any person who makes a complaint of sexual assault or gender-based violence, that person from the outset would have the assistance of advice from and information provided by a solicitor funded by the state. We know that if an individual is prosecuted with such an offence, that individual from a very early stage will have the protection and indeed the advice of a lawyer provided by the state under the Criminal Legal Aid Scheme. Similarly, I believe at the outset, when a woman is making a complaint about a sexual offence that was perpetrated upon her, she should be informed at the very outset of what the investigation will involve, of what the Gardaí will do in terms of accumulating evidence, of the statements that the Gardaí shall have to put together from the persons who have relevant evidence, of the fact that those statements will then subsequently be provided to the person accused of the criminal offence, of the fact that the individual who is accused of the criminal offence, the rights that they will have in any prosecution, of the fact that the complainant shall have to give evidence in court, in public, in respect of the complaint that they are making, of the fact that they will be subject to cross-examination, what that cross-examination will involve and what protections exist for that person under the legislation that exists at present, particularly the amendment that was introduced by the Sex Offenders Act 2001 to the Criminal Law Rape Act 1981. If this is enacted, it's not going to have a remarkable increase on the numbers of people coming forward, but it will be part of the solution. It will send out a message to women in particular who are victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault that there is protection provided to them by the state in the criminal justice process. It will make them aware that they're not on their own, and they will be apprised at an early stage of what the process involved. I know that sometimes people have suggested that victims of sexual offences should be given legal representation within court. It is important to note that in 2001, Section 34 of the Sex Offenders Act amended the Section 4 of the Criminal Law Rape Act 1981, and it provided that in certain circumstances a complainant in a rape trial shall be entitled to be heard in relation to the application, and for that purpose they are entitled to be legally represented during the hearing of the application. So that is, I'm not suggesting anything in this that is a fundamental departure from the principles of a criminal trial, where the prosecution is represented by one prosecutor who makes the claim against the accused. However, what I am suggesting in this legislation is that we do something to provide greater support to women in particular who are victims of sexual violence, gender-based violence or violence in a close relationship. We have to do something to encourage those women to come forward more, and we have to let them know that they have the protection and the support of the state if they should do so. I'm now going to pass over to my colleague, Deputy O'Loughlin.